All right, we've got our Facebook Live up and going. I see we've got a few more that have joined us, so welcome. For those of you that have just now joined us, we're so happy to have you here for today's webinar. We do love to hear from you, so feel free to jump in the chat box and say hello. Let us know where you're joining us from. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to give you as much time as possible to hear from our speaker today. So again, welcome everyone. For our webinar today on practical behavior tips for a smooth after-school transition with Dr. Stephanie Hart. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin. I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist with Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs. Throughout Texas, we have 4 separate projects known as PACT, PATH, PIN, and TEAM. Our mission here at Partners Resource Network is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. And also joining me today from Partners Resource Network is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning, and our Technology Specialist, Zach Hidalgo. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can reach out to Zach in the chat box. For those of you attending on Zoom, if you're needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. Following the presentation, we will have a time for question and answers. If you're joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can type your questions in the comments. We are recording today's webinar, and the webinar recording will be available on our website at prntexas.org, as well as our Facebook page and our YouTube page. So without further delay, I would like to introduce today's guest speaker, Dr. Stephanie Hart. Dr. Hart is an assistant professor of special education at West Texas A&M University, the Lana Hatton Professor of Learning Disabilities, and the director of the WTAMU Center for Learning Disabilities. Dr. Hart is also a board-certified behavior analyst, a doctoral level, and she has taught courses in an approved BCBA preparation program in a previous university position. At West Texas A&M University, Dr. Hart teaches in the education preparation and educational diagnostician programs, including courses in classroom and behavior management, low incidence disabilities, collaboration, adolescence, and transition. She has provided teacher coaching and behavior management to school districts across the Panhandle and parent training via teleconsultation to families of children with autism spectrum disorder. Dr. Hart's research focuses on how to provide highly trained teachers who demonstrate measurable change in their abilities to meet behavioral and academic needs in individuals with and without disabilities. She conducts intervention research with students and teachers in various academic settings, including students in K-12 and university settings, in the areas of autism, applied behavioral analysis, observational assessment, and single subject design. Dr. Hart, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to you now and let you share.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. We're going to be talking today about how we can make that after school time run a little smoother. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides with you. All right. Okay, so practical tips for a smooth after school transition. So for our agenda today, we're going to anchor ourselves with a little bit of background knowledge, work through 5 common scenarios that you're likely to encounter after school, and then put it all together to really think about how you can apply this in your life. So let's start with background knowledge. So we're going to touch on a few things for background knowledge. First we're going to talk about why after school is so hard. Now, for those of you who are parents, you already know why the after school time is so difficult. But we're going to use that that slide to just sort of anchor ourselves and get all on the same page. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what ADHD looks like. Now, this presentation is not exclusive to ADHD, but we're going to use ADHD sort of as our central focus. But really, this applies to any student with a disability that's going to involve or impact executive functioning. And that's our next bullet, is to look at executive functioning. Executive functioning issues can impact students with ADHD, students with autism, students with learning disabilities, students with various developmental delays. So we're gonna really touch on themes that are going to hold true for all of those groups. And then we're going to talk briefly about behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis. Applied behavior analysis is the um, methodology that I was trained in, and I'm going to talk about that and how that can really help us understand and give us a lens for understanding behavior. And then just we're going to wrap it up, our background knowledge section, by talking about why we need behavior management tools. So first thing, why is after school so hard? Like I said, those of you who are parents are well aware that the after school time can be stressful. So when we think about it from the parents' perspectives, parents by that point, you may be picking up your kid at 3:30, it may be 4, it may be 4:15. Parents and kids are really tired at that point. It's been a long time, part of the day. Um, Parents are managing a lot of things, probably have been up early. So I think it's good to acknowledge that, that's not our highest energy time of the day. Parents are often multitasking. Many parents are working parents, and even just finding time in your workday to go pick up your kids and take them home from school is a multitasking challenge. You may be bringing homework with you. You may be trying to balance work while you're bringing your kid home. It may be a small break, and then you have to go back to do more work tasks later. So we know that parents are multitasking. They're also thinking about all of the pieces of the rest of the day that have to be put into place. Um, we have laundry, dinner, carpool, all of the things that are going to happen after school. So it's pretty rare that parents are able to focus on one thing and during the after school period. Another thing to think about for parents are these non-negotiable activities that have to happen in between the end of the school day and bedtime. So I would say minimal, those non-negotiables are dinner, bath, and bed. Probably those are the three things that must happen every night. Obviously, we want to have dinner every night. We have to get our kids to bed, but we also have other non-negotiables to think about. There may be multiple children to pick up in carpool. There may be after school sports. There may be after school activities. So every parent's going to have their a different list of non-negotiables, but there are always on parents' minds a list of things that we know we have to accomplish every day between the end of the school day and bedtime. And then I think for parents too, they're really thinking about keeping on schedule, trying to fit everything in and making sure that all those non-negotiables are addressed. So from the child perspective, the child is probably tired after being at school all day. Children are very often hungry after school. That's something we need to think about being addressed. This is when kids need brain breaks the most. They've been in school all day, and they really need time to unwind and time to relax. Another issue to think about is that students who are taking medication, especially if they take it in the morning, it's probably wearing off at that point. So if we think about this scenario, we have parents and children with these features coming together. This is not a great time for kids to be doing homework. However, in the reality of the small window between after school and bedtime, this is exactly the window when homework occurs. And so that's a challenge we think about, is that I think most helping providers like psychologists would say, take your kid home, get them a snack, give them a break before you start homework. That is a wonderful recommendation, but is sometimes just not feasible. Sometimes there's not time for that extended downtime before homework starts. And so that's really what we're looking at as we start this presentation is how do we optimize a scenario when the optimal solution of taking a break isn't necessarily doable. So I'm just going to focus briefly on what ADHD looks like. I'm sure you all are well aware what it looks like, but these particular features are going to impact the challenges that we see after school. So in a typical student with ADHD, we are looking at a student who is inattentive, impulsive, distracted, disorganized, and sometimes constantly moving. And like I said, these are not features only of ADHD. We're going to see a lot of these features in students with autism, in other learning disabilities, and developmental disabilities. I am guessing that if your child has a disability, you're seeing at least some of these uh, items that do apply in your situation. So let's talk a little bit about this concept of executive functioning. People have different levels of information about executive functioning, but executive functioning is looking at all of the strategies we're using to keep the plates spinning in the air. So when we think about executive functioning, we're thinking about these sort of high level tools that help us with our day. And so here are some examples of executive functioning areas. So adaptable thinking, planning, self-monitoring, self-control, working memory, time management, and organization. So students that have the various disabilities that we've talked about may struggle with some of these executive functioning aspects. For example, we know our students with autism often have trouble adapting to new plans or a plan that's changing. So that would be in the area of adaptable thinking. Um, we know that some of our students with autism, ADHD, different developmental disabilities, learning disabilities may have issues with working memory and time management. It may be that it's hard for students to hold multiple things in their brains at once. It's also hard for students to efficiently make their way through processes. And so, really, we're talking about how do you take a child who might struggle with some of these issues and usher them through that after school time in a way that has the least amount of obstacles. So also with executive functioning, we're talking about self-monitoring and self-control. That um, that implies a sense that you can pause and reflect and sort of readjust your behavior and your expectations. That's really what self-monitoring and self-control is all about. And it's hard for some of our students to do this. It's hard for them to reflect. It's hard for them to pause in the moment. So these are some of the aspects of executive functioning that we both know are very important to making our way through a day efficiently, but we also know that our students with disabilities might struggle with them. And let's just talk a little bit about applied behavior analysis. So that is the training that I've had. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And if you're not familiar with behavior analysis is the science of learning and behavior. It really gives us a good understanding of how behavior works and why people do what they do. And it focuses on the interaction between the environment and the people in the environment. So, what we're looking at is the environment itself, the after school time, all of the characteristics of that time that we looked at earlier in the parent and the child columns. And then it's also looking at the interactions between the people in the environment and how the interactions between people impacts behavior. So we're talking about interactions between parent and child here after school, or interactions between siblings. And the point of behavior analysis is to really look at how we can improve learning behaviors and how we can decrease problem behaviors. And then really the last thing I wanted to focus on is, why do we need behavior management tools? We need behavior management tools because we need to make our interactions with our kids smoother, more efficient, less stressful. We want to put them in a supportive environment where they can thrive and we can thrive. So we're doing this, we're using behavior management tools in all situations, but especially during this after school time, to make this everyday process run more smoothly and to reduce the stress level for both parent and child. So let's talk about 5 common scenarios that you're likely to see after school. So first we're going to talk about the scenario, and then we're going to talk about some strategies that you could use during that time. So here are 5 scenarios that I've come up with. So the first one is called not a morning person. And of course, that's not the after school time. That's during our before school time. Then we're going to break it down to the car ride home. Where is my, will you please just, and more schoolwork. So these are 5 common scenarios that you're likely to see in parent-child interactions surrounding the school day. So here's the first one. Not a morning person. So before we get to these big words in the middle, let's just think about what it means to be a morning person or not a morning person. And let's think about that time that you as a parent spend at home with your kids before school. Or if you're a teacher, think about the time that the kids in your class have spent with their families before school. So thinking about what it looks like. I heard an excellent description a couple years ago about, the terminology was activate. So families get up in the morning, they get going, and then they activate their morning routine. And what that means is they typically have a routine they go through that involves wake up, getting dressed, breakfast, prompting the kids along, driving to school, carpooling, all of the sequence of events that happens generally in a relatively short period of time and at a relatively rush pace. I think we would like to think that we're all relaxed in the morning and we have time. You see on TV families having pancake breakfast before school, and you think, well, not in my family. We don't have time to get up and do that. And I think that's true for most families. So when you think about not a morning person, think about from your perspective as an adult. You might love morning, and that would be great. But for the most part, I think when parents are getting up with kids and trying to get their kids on time to school, they are getting up and activating their routine, and there's a sense of urgency to it. They want to, whether they try to consciously make it relaxed and slow paced or not, there is a sense of urgency because kids have to get to school on time and parents have to get to work on time. So if we think about not a morning person, think about your typical morning where you get up and you are in that go, go, go mood from the beginning. Now, your kid obviously can sense this. And there's this constant worry for parents. What if a bump comes up? What if we can't find the shoes? What if I can't find the keys? What if there needs to be a last minute diaper change for the baby on the way out the door? What if we remember we were supposed to take Valentine's Day cards for all the classmates and we can't find them? So these are all unanticipated bumps that make us feel rushed in the morning. And as an adult, I'm sure you're well aware of the potential obstacles that can make you feel rushed. So I just wanted to set the stage here to be thinking about, one, when you feel rushed, your kid feels rushed. And that's hard to avoid when this is a time-bound scenario. But here are some strategies that we can use as adults to center and organize ourselves. And by centering and organizing ourselves, it helps our kids center and organize. When we are rushed, they're rushed. When we feel stressed, they feel stressed. So you may be the master of morning routines and you may do all of these things every day, but I wanted to talk through them because I see different levels of understanding here. Sometimes when we go through this list, adults say, "Oh, wow, I haven't thought about doing those things in the morning. That would be really helpful for myself." And sometimes I hear parents saying, "Oh, I do these things, but my kid is still stressed." So we're going to take it one step further and say, here are some things that you can do, and when you actively communicate them and talk about them when with your kid, then you're sharing them and you're bringing the kid into it. One thing we do sometimes as adults, for both parents and teachers, is that we're pretty good at enacting the strategies for ourselves, but they're very hidden. They're very covert, and it may be that students are just, and our children are just not able to see that these things are happening. So here's some of the strategies that we can use to help smooth out that morning time before school. So we're looking at routine, modeling, organizing, visual cues, and this concept that I'm calling just one thing. So first thing, routine in the morning. I think most parents have a good routine in the morning. You might think about, how explicit am I with the routine? Is this a routine that I know about, or is this a routine that I've actively communicated to my child? So if you think about in a classroom, we use schedules, we use picture schedules, we try to use the same activities in the same order. That routine is really important. And if your kids have any way to follow along with the routine through a visual or a schedule, that will help them take more ownership and be able to do what you need them to do in the morning. So the next step is modeling. We need to model the behavior that we want to see. And so modeling really kind of goes hand in hand with organizing. When you prepare the night before for your day, are you able to organize your materials for the next morning? Now, as a parent, you probably do. I know that I get my bag ready the day before, I get my lunch ready the day before, I get my keys and put them where I need them, I get my shoes, I get my outfits. I do all of those things to organize myself, but I can take it one step further and model that for my kid. Like when we walk in the door after school, I can say, I'm going to put my backpack right here by the door so I can find it in the morning. Those are things that you may do, but if we take it one step further and model it for our kid and talk through it, then you're sharing the benefits of that strategy with your kid. Also having visual cues. Many of us have notes that we leave for ourselves. You might think about leaving a note for your kid on the front door. Oh, tomorrow is the violin lesson after school. I'm going to put a note on our door that says violin so that I can remember to take the violin. So it's not just the act of putting the note on the door, it's the act of putting the note on the door while you talk out loud about it and showing your kid, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it. And oh, look, if you have something you want to remember for tomorrow, you can also put a note on the front door. So it's taking what we do and using modeling to really make it explicit. And then the last thing I might say here for not a morning person, for just one thing, is to really think about not overloading our kids with commands in the morning. One thing at a time. Instead of saying shoes, jacket, backpack, say go get your shoes and then come find me. Go get your jacket and come find me. Put your backpack on your back and then come find me. So that really focuses kids and laser focuses them to think about one task at a time. This is really good with for our kids with ADHD who might tend to get a little scattered. This is also really good for our kids who have any sort of language processing disorders and really need to focus on understanding and processing one command at a time. So that would impact our students with autism, with different levels of language processing, just to say one command and then pause and let the kid do that one thing and then come back to you to check in. So that's our first scenario, not a morning person. So the next thing we're going to think about is the car ride home. Now, I know as a parent, I was guilty of this for sure. I would pick up my kid from school and I would always say, "Hi, how was your day?" And I'd listen about their day. And then I would immediately pivot in my mind to start thinking about all the things I needed to do to make sure that those non-negotiables were met that day for our after school plan. So I would think out loud. And like I said, this is not necessarily the best strategy. Sometimes, as parents and adults, we do things that we know are not the best choices. So after I would check in with my kid about their day, I would out loud preview the rest of the afternoon to let my kid know what was coming. Now, I did that because I thought that previewing it would help my kid be prepared for all the things that were going to have to happen that day. But really, I was just overloading my kid. And so I might say, okay, well, I picked you up from school. We're going to stop by home and get a really quick snack. And then we're going to go to violin. So we're going to stop by home, get a quick snack. And again, this is what I might tell my kid in the car. Go ahead and leave your shoes on. We're going to put our book bags by the door, leave your shoes on, get a quick snack, go potty, and then we're going to get right back in the car for violin. After violin, we're going to come home. We need to sit and do homework. Then we're going to eat dinner and bath and bed. Now, in my mind, I wanted to preview the rest of the afternoon to make sure I wasn't leaving anything out. But by going over all those steps with my kid, I was really overloading them. So here's some strategies that can help with that. The first thing is being conscious about command overload. How many commands are you giving at once? And are you allowing time to process? There has been some research I was looking at most recently that the number of directives a child can keep in their head is actually much lower than we thought. And so when we're talking about younger kids, they really need to focus on one command at a time and completing it before they move on to the next thing. I think by the time you get to upper elementary and middle school, the number of commands they could hold in their head was only up to 3. So 3 things. And if we're asking them to do 3 things and remember all 3 things and to do all 3 items to completion, that's a pretty big task. So think about command overload and asking them to do one thing at a time. So perhaps in that violin scenario, we say, okay, we're going to go home. We're going to have snack and please keep your shoes on. So that's sort of sneaking in 2 things. I understand that, but it's really focusing on snack. And then when snack is done, you can say, okay, now go to the potty so we can get in the car. So you're really putting no more than 2 things together. And that really gives the kid a chance to hear what you're saying, understand what you're saying, process what you're saying, and then complete the activity before you name the next task. So that takes us into the next strategy here, which is chunking. You're really thinking about how you can logically group the smallest number of activities together. Another thing is timing. You want to give the directive right before it's needed. So again, that long laundry list of keep your shoes on, we're going to have snack, we're going to go potty, we're going to get in the car. We know that that's too many directives to give at once, but also I'm not giving the reminders at the right times. So you want to give the reminder or the prompt right before it's needed. For example, the moment that you walk through the door is the time to say, keep your shoes on. And then once you get through the door and you've said, keep your shoes on, then the timing for the next directive would be, let's go straight to the kitchen table for snack. That's the next activity. When snack is done, the next logical prompt is, great, let's go to the bathroom so we can get in the car. So you're taking all of your many, many plans that we think of as an adult, breaking them down, and you're only giving it to them piece by piece on an as needed basis. The next thing is to prioritize. And I think parents do this naturally anyway, but just knowing that you're not going to be able to fit everything in after school is important. And knowing what to prioritize on a given day is making those decisions is helpful. And then the last thing here we talked about previously is using picture schedules. Um, Please remember that when you look through your phone, it's all pictures. They're all icons, they're all visuals. Even as adults, we use visuals to make it through our day. Picture schedules are not only for very young kids that can't read. It is totally appropriate for older kids to have both words and pictures together. You may find that students don't even read the words because they just start looking at the pictures to go through. So I like having word schedules and picture schedules even for older kids because it really makes sense to their brains, and it's not an insult to have a picture or a small icon on a schedule even for older kids. So let's talk about this third concept, which is where is my? We know with some of our kids, they really struggle with organization. And you can spend a lot of time both before and after school looking for the same items over and over. We know they need their backpacks. We know they need their shoes. We know they need their coats. We know they need maybe their homework notebooks. These are things, items they're going to use every day. And there are some things we can put in place to help ensure that we spend less time hunting for those items. So here are some suggestions. Natural cues, visual labels, calendars, and logical homes. And again, as a fully functioning adult, these are probably things that you do. But you might think about, how often do I model for my kid what I'm doing? And how often do I not only do them and model them, but then help walk my kid through them? So, for example, we had a very large, round wicker basket at the front door for many years. And the wicker basket was about 1.5 feet across, pretty big basket. That's where the backpack went. When we came in the house, right inside the door was the basket. That's where the backpack went after school. And then about 2 steps away from that was a closet where shoes went. So that helped us every day. The minute we walked in the house, we knew where the backpack was going and we knew where the shoes were going. And it wasn't just a random place on the floor. It was a designated place that you could visually see. The basket was a place that you could visually see and that served as a both a natural cue and a visual when we walked in the room. That really helped us later when we had to track down the backpack and shoes. And it really helped us the next morning when we were getting ready for school the next day. So again, these may be things that you may do. You may be highly organized, you may take your shoes right to your closet, but are we taking the time to explain to our kids, hey, this is a strategy that I'm using and you can use it too. Here, let me help you. Let me help you use it. And just be aware that an empty spot on the floor is not as good of a visual cue as the basket. The basket is a contained visual cue, whereas an empty spot on the floor can easily be overlooked. So when we're thinking about how to organize our kids after school, you can think about natural cues, these visual cues. You can think about visual labels. Maybe in your closet, you have a row for shoes for your oldest kid and a row for shoes for your youngest kid. You might want to label with the kid's name or even the kid's face to show them where their shoes go. So that's a way that we can visually label the space. If they're not labeled, then you're just expecting the kid to remember which row is which. They might remember or they might not, but having a visual label makes it more explicit. You also might think about having calendars. On different days, we do different activities. Again, sometimes we think of calendars as strategies we use with little kids, but actually, as adults, we use calendars all the time. So even with older kids, an after school calendar that's listing Monday through Friday that has just the after school activity listed might be incredibly helpful. You could have a middle schooler that temporarily forgets what day it is and they can't even remember what's after school. Having that visual reminder that it is Wednesday, which is violin day, can be very helpful. And then the last thing is logical homes. Just thinking about what items do we have to keep up with every day after school, and where is a logical place for them to go? Can the coat be hung in the closet? Can the shoes be put in the closet, in the rack, on the row with the label? All of these little steps you're taking help your brain when your brain is temporarily thinking about either what's already happened in the day, the school day that's finished, or what's coming up. It helps us pause and say, oh, right, at this moment, I need to deal with this object, and this is what I do with it. So our next concept is, will you please just? Now, I know as a parent, we've heard ourselves say this over and over. It's this Groundhog Day scenario where we tell our kid the same thing every day and it never seems to stick. I know we all do that. For example, will you please just put your shoes in the closet? Will you please just put your coat in your room? Things that we know are helpful to students and helpful to our kids, and that's why we say them over and over, but they do not ever seem to stick. So here are some strategies we can use. We're going to talk about chunking, choice, reinforcing, de-escalating, and tone matching. So the first one that we've talked about already is chunking and limiting the number of directives you're getting at a time. When you walk in the door is when you say, put your bag in the basket. We would hope it would get to a point where you don't have to tell your kid every day to put your bag in the basket. But the best way to get it done with only saying the directive one time is to make sure you're saying it at the moment they need it and you're not camouflaging it with other directives. So think about, you walk in the door, you say, put your bag in the basket, and then it's done. Put your shoes in the closet. Put your coat in the closet. Let's go to the table for snack. So bit by bit, and you're thinking about chunking and timing to make it optimal. So then the next concept here is choice. After school is not a time when we can offer a lot of choices. If we offer a lot of choices after school, then that's when we don't meet those non-negotiables. We don't get everything done if we say, oh, would you rather do homework or play outside? Well, of course they'd rather play outside. So sometimes we want to offer choices, but we can't. So think about where you can build in a choice. And when you're thinking about choices, you can think about having choice A or choice B. That's the illusion of choice, but you're really controlling both aspects. So, for example, um, we have two snack choices. Would you like goldfish or pretzels? Now, of course, you'll need to plan ahead and you'll need to know that there are two choices for snack, and that's what they are. But that gives the kids some choice when really the timing of snack is not up to them, the timing of the activities is not up to them, and the order of activities is not up to them. So think about where you can build in choice, because that can provide some little breaths of fresh air in your afternoon in a pretty locked in schedule. Think about reinforcement and reward. When the backpack goes right into the basket, go ahead and acknowledge that. Thank you so much for putting your backpack in your basket. Now we'll know where it is for tomorrow. Good job putting your backpack away. Thank you. That's the moment. The timing for reinforcement is just as important as the timing of the directive. So then the last two things here are really talking about being conscious of escalation. It's so easy to listen to your kid escalate the conversation and then respond the same way. So, for example, the kid comes in the door and maybe you don't have a basket for your backpack, or maybe you don't remember to prompt at that moment when they come in. So the kid comes in the door, gets halfway down the room, halfway down the hall to their bedroom, drops their backpack right in the middle of the floor, kicks off their shoes right in the middle of the floor, goes in their room and closes the door. And you just want to say, will you please just stop leaving your backpack in the hall? Will you please stop taking your shoes off? It's time for snack. We don't have time to go into your room to play. Will you please just do what I need you to do? And it's really typical when you've raised your voice just a little bit for the kid to come out of the room and say, but I don't even want to go to violin. I don't want snack. You never let me do this. It's so easy then for the parent to come back and escalate it even further. Well, you know what? Maybe we just don't need to go to violin. Maybe it doesn't make sense for us to pay for these lessons. You don't even want to practice. You leave all your stuff in the hall. I have this conversation with you every day. Why are we going to violin every day when I just get pushback from you all the time? It's very easy for that scenario to happen. The kid does one thing, you respond with a slightly raised voice. The kid responds back with the beginnings of a tantrum. Well, I don't want to go to violin anyway. And as a parent, you're so frustrated, you respond back by raising your voice even further. As a parent, I have done that many times. We do that as parents, we do that as teachers. The way to keep that escalation scenario from happening is to really be thinking about this concept of tone matching. Whatever tone your kid is giving you, instead of raising it up a notch, we need to think about taking it down a notch. And so as soon as the kid comes out and says, well, I don't want to go to violin anyway, I never get to have time to play, I'm tired of school, I don't want to do anything. That's the moment where you think about tone matching and you take it down. You take your voice down and you say, I know this has been a really busy week. I bet you do have a lot of homework, and I can see why you don't want to go to violin. You know what? Let's go into the kitchen and have a snack. I bet a snack will help. So when the kid comes out and their voice is here, you have a choice. You're naturally going to want to escalate, but if you can consciously drop your voice lower, give a suggestion, acknowledge their frustration, that is going to help the kid de-escalate instead of escalate. So then the last thing is more schoolwork. Now, homework is a very loaded issue. As you can imagine, homework is a very frustrating time for both parents and kids. There is a lot of research on homework, and most of it says that we need far less homework than we have. Homework, when it's helpful, is when your kid has a task that's perfectly matched to their learning level. It's not too hard, it's not too easy, it's not too long. It's sort of this Goldilocks scenario that would give your kid just a little bit of extra homework practice time and then be done. Now, the problem with that is that we usually give the same homework assignment to every kid in the class. So, of course, it's not going to be a Goldilocks assignment for every kid, which means our kids with disabilities that come home, we already anticipate that the homework might be too hard. It might be too long. It's going to be frustrating. That sets up a scenario from the beginning of frustration and a scenario where you are anticipating difficulties and your kid is also anticipating difficulties. Like we said, in a perfect scenario, we would say, great, come home after school, have a snack, unwind, don't worry about homework, do it later. And when you do homework, it's not going to be too much. That's a perfect scenario that doesn't happen very often. So one thing that's helpful to keep in mind for homework is this concept of can't versus won't. It's the same thing I talk to teachers about when I work with them in the classrooms. You might think about, what is the conflict about around homework? My kid can't do homework or they won't do homework. I think most of the time, as humans, we default to won't. I hear parents and teachers say, well, he just won't do homework. He can, and he doesn't want to do it, and he's difficult, and he fights it all the time, and I just don't understand why he won't do it. He just simply refuses to do it. That is true in some percentage of cases. But many times it's more of the can't. I can't do the homework easily. The homework is not on my level. The homework takes a very high level of concentration that's hard for me to sustain. I can't sustain this level for an hour because I have an hour's worth of homework. So just think about that you're going to want to give different support and different strategies for can't versus won't. If your kid is fully capable of doing the homework and it's not an overly long task and you know they're capable of doing the homework, then you might want to think about this is really a won't scenario. If there's something as an adult you don't want to do, it helps to have an incentive. So if you know your kid is fully capable of doing it, that's where you might think about some sort of reinforcement or reward. I know that writing your spelling words is not very exciting. Let's try to do it quickly and do it right. And then maybe we can spend a little time outside on the playground after violin is finished. So you're putting a reward in place, but you can only do that if you know the kid is fully capable of doing the homework. Now, if the idea is I can't do the homework, I can't focus for that long, I can't figure out the problems, I can't figure out the directions, then a reward is not going to help. You're going to need some sort of supportive strategy. Oh, let me help read the directions to you. Do you need some help understanding the first question? Do you need to come check in with me after you finish a couple of problems? And these are the same strategies that teachers use. They're acknowledging that the kid has tangible obstacles that keep them from getting the work done. And then they're building in small support strategies to help with those. Also, for our kids with ADHD that really struggle with sustained concentration, look at the page with them. And you can even take a pencil and divide it if you want, or fold the paper in half and say, okay, do this chunk of problems and then come check in with me. Okay, now do this chunk of problems and come check in with me. So again, you're addressing their need for assistance. It's not that they won't do it. In that scenario, it's they can't do it easily. So here are 5 scenarios, and let's spend a few minutes putting it all together. All right, so one of the things you might think about are what other activities are a struggle and how does executive functioning impact this problem? So here are all the behavior strategies that we've talked about. These are from all 5 of our common scenarios. And here are our executive functioning concepts. So let's match them up and see which strategies might help with which concepts. Okay, so our first one. So for adaptable thinking, we can use some of the strategies that we talked about. If we wanted to promote adaptable thinking, or if we notice our kid particularly struggles with adaptable thinking, then that's where we can use these skills of modeling and prioritizing. So we can say, you know what? I see that there was a lot of traffic and we didn't get home as soon as we thought. I don't think we're going to have time to sit at the table and have a long snack. But you know what? Snack's important. Let's find a snack we can take in the car on the way to violin. And by talking through that scenario out loud, you're demonstrating how you're prioritizing to make sure the important things still get done, and you're also modeling for your kid. Chances are you've already mentally gone through that step. You already know that you're going to take that snack in the car. But by telling your kid it's going to happen and explaining it, you can get your kid on board, and it makes that next step of actually having the snack in the car run more smoothly because the kid knows what's going to happen and why it's going to happen. So planning, we can use these concepts of organizing and scheduling. Those are things that as kids get older, they need to be explicitly modeled because kids may not naturally plan. But when our kids get into upper elementary school and middle school, we do need them to take some ownership of planning. Maybe they plan the order of activities they do for homework. And they start to look at a schedule for the week to think about, oh, I have a spelling test on Friday. That means that I need to be organized with my materials and study on Thursday to be ready for Friday. Again, we're talking out loud and making this explicit for our kids. So then we have self-monitoring and self-control. We're thinking about how can we get our kids to pause and reflect and adjust some of their choices. So for self-monitoring, it's helpful to think about something here like can't versus won't. Ideally, we want our kids to look at a homework question and read it and then know what to do to get help if they're stuck. So that's the self-monitoring. It's not starting to play with your pencil. It's not skipping a question and moving on. It's thinking, do I understand this question enough to be able to answer it? No. What can I do? I can ask for help. So it's recognizing and then acting. And that's important in can't versus won't because it's very easy to say, oh, I'm just going to zone out and not complete my work at all. Or it's also very easy to go down that doom spiral and for the kids to start saying, oh, well, I can never do these. There's no point even doing any of them because I can't do it. I'm dumb. I don't understand this. All the other kids can. Something's wrong with me. I shouldn't even try. And then also you will need to reinforce those attempts at self-monitoring. And then the same thing for self-control. That's where we're bringing in tone matching and de-escalation and reinforcing. What you're reinforcing is when a kid notices that you have dropped your voice level, and then if the kid calms down, that's when you notice and reinforce. Oh, I see that you've calmed down a little. Great. It looks like you're ready for snack. So then our last three executive functioning tools are working memory, time management, and organization. And these are some of the strategies we talked about previously that you can use for this. So working memory, you're really thinking about small bits of directives at a time and giving each directive right when you need it. For time management, we're talking about routine and modeling. When we have a routine, we don't have to stop and think between as many activities. And then finally, for organization, we're using calendars and visuals, and we're remembering to use visuals even with um, adults and even with students who are older. So takeaways from today, less is more. Sometimes we just need to give one directive and then stop and pause and give it time to sink in. Another thing to think about is a lot of this work is preventative. You're putting them in place before problem behaviors happen so that you can reduce the chance that those problem behaviors will happen. And then the last thing, super hard for parents and teachers, is don't take it personally. The kids might be frustrated about the day, the homework, violin, lots of things. Sometimes they are frustrated with us as parents, but a lot of times they are just frustrated about other things, and it's not about me. And the more I can step back and not take it personally, the better I'm able to implement these strategies effectively. So we went a little longer than I thought we would, but we do have 5 minutes left for any questions that you have. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to come back. I would love to answer any questions that you have.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, if you're joining us on Zoom, please put those questions in the Q&A box. Sometimes the chat gets really busy, and so the Q&A makes it a little bit easier. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can type them in the comments and we'll get them. All right, so our first question. Somebody says, my child wants to know all the things that are coming up. Only telling them one or two will have them asking, then what? Then what? So what is a good strategy for this child?
So that's a great question. I definitely want to acknowledge that some kids are more advanced planners than others. Um, Even the kids that like to know everything ahead of time can still potentially get overwhelmed when they actually do hear the list of things ahead of time. Um, I think that concept of previewing can be very helpful, but you might think about doing it in chunks. Like you might say, here are the first three things we're going to do after school, and then stop, and then give them the next chunk, because that might satisfy their need for knowing what's going to happen without literally giving them every step that they're going to do, because some kids, they want to hear it all, but they still get overwhelmed by it. The other suggestion I would have for that is adding in a visual, because you can talk through it with the visual and then you can always come back and say, well, let's look on the chart or let's look on the calendar and see what's next. Because what you're prompting the kid to do is to eventually look on the chart themselves to see what's next. And that is really helpful when you've given kids the capacity to say, oh, I want to know what's happening next. I can either ask or I can find out the answer myself. So adding a visual can be very supportive in that situation.
Okay, excellent. So when you were talking about homework and the difference between I can't and I won't, any strategies or tips for parents when we're in that I can't phase? Any strategies or tips on talking to your child's art committee to work out a good plan for the homework struggles?
I think taking it to the ARD committee and talking about it is definitely a crucial step. I think as parents, we can gather a lot of interesting information, and the more detail we can take back to the ARD committee, the better they're going to be able to solve the problem. And so here are some examples of information you can take back. Like, for example, my kid sits for 5 full minutes before they even start. That's a useful clue. Or my kid reads the directions over and over and then just sits there. Or my kid doesn't read the directions, starts writing on the assignment, and then I can tell they're missing crucial pieces because they didn't read the directions. Or you might say, my kid works for 10 minutes and then stops. Or my kid stops every 5 minutes and takes a 20-minute break. Like these are all useful clues that you can collect at home. So I would say be a really astute observer during homework time and take some notes on exactly where the breakdown is happening and take those back to the ARD committee and say, okay, we need solutions for this and this and this. There are too many problems. Each problem takes too long. We never finish a problem. Just the more clues they can have, the better, because that is one thing that's tough, is that sometimes the ARD committee doesn't see what you see at home. So I would say capture as specific of clues and information you can and just make a list and take it back and say, okay, here are some of the problems I'm seeing. How can we adjust homework to make this better? Because they're usually small, precise adjustments that we can make to help a lot of those things. But if everyone has to be on, but everyone needs to be on the same page to know what adjustments we need to prioritize.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So somebody said that transportation concerns prior to making a student a car rider or riding in the handicap bus, trying to keep the student in the least restrictive environment. Does an IEP end prior to the student getting on the bus? So in other words, does the IEP follow that student on the bus for their transportation to school and then after school going home? And then are there accommodations that can help that student on the bus?
So that is a monumentally fantastic question. I would say two things. I would say, are there behavioral interventions and strategies we can use to help the student on the bus? Absolutely. There are always behavioral strategies we can put in place to help behavior in any situation. Now, your question about does the IEP basically, are we legally obligated to follow things from the IEP while on the school bus? That's a legal question. That's a fantastic question. I don't know the answer to that. Um, Maybe I should, but I don't. And I don't want to take you down the wrong path. One resource we were just talking about is a fantastic person who is on Facebook and Instagram. I believe she has a web page. Um, She is known as the SPED boss. Her name is Karen Cunningham, and her expertise seems to be in special educational law. And those are the kinds of questions that I bet she would love to answer. And I bet that there probably is an answer for that. So I would seek out somebody like that who's really an expert in special education law. Um, Karen Cunningham, and I believe she goes by the SPED boss. I bet she would have some fantastic things to say about that.
Absolutely. Well, I've got that we are at 1:16, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Dr. Hart, thank you so much. These were so many wonderful tips. I was taking notes and thinking, oh, I can use this idea with the adults in the house. When you've got, adults in the house with ADHD, these are great tips. So thank you for that. It's not just for our younger kids, it's also for our older kids as well and our adults. So thank you so much for that wealth of information. Thank you all for joining us today. As we're wrapping up, just want to share a few final things with you. So again, one more time, thank you so much for being here. As a reminder, a recording of today's webinar will be available on our website at prntexas.org, as well as our Facebook page and on our YouTube page. For those of you that are joined us by Zoom that are needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. We do have a few more webinars coming up. April is a busy month for us, so make plans to join us for our upcoming webinars. We have a webinar with SpedTechs called Understanding SLD, Specific Learning Disability, and Dyslexia and Special Education, coming up next Wednesday on April 22nd at 12:15. Then on April 28th, we have Preventing Learning Loss When Extended School Year Services Make a Difference with our special guest presenter, Catherine King from Region 10 Education Service Center. And we're going to wrap up our spring lineup of webinars on May 5th with Medicaid waivers in Texas with a special guest, Courtney Carruthers with the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. On the screen is contact information for our Director of Statewide Services, Christina, and myself. Please check out our website, prntexas.org, for information on upcoming webinars and events in your local area, as well as lots of information for parents. You can like and follow us on Facebook and X at PRN And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Feel free to reach out to us with any other questions that you have at any time. And Dr. Hart, always a pleasure to have you. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and taking time to share this with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you all and have a wonderful Tuesday.